Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to Psychedelic Trance Production Concepts. My name is Greg Farley. I've been making music under the production name of Mubali since 2003. I specialize, well, I specialize, but I tend to like types of psychedelic trance that are a semi organic, a marriage between groove and power, like something psychedelic for the brain, something groovy for the body, or so on and so forth. Over the years, I've used many different DAWs. I started out using Orion Platinum. I was taught, fortunately, by a very nice guy by the name of Ocelot, and he's been very influential for a lot of the producers here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then I was shown Logic um, back in 2004 by another producer friend as well that makes psychedelic trance under the name of Meta, and he that was what I needed to make the next step to use something that I felt I could express myself a little bit better with and had it was easier for me to make it sound a little more like the tracks that I used to play. I have a couple of years experience before I started producing as a DJ in a few different genres. I started out with drum and bass as what I really liked playing when I was getting my feet wet, and I was gripped by psychedelic trance, and that's one of it's really like the connection between some of the intense rhythmic capabilities of drum and bass music as well as the intertextural layers of psychedelic trance and just strange sounds in general. And that's my biggest thing is I just like things that sound a little weird but somewhat something you can almost place, where it's an echo of some familiarity or at least, some comfortability. Let's see here. How many of you guys are familiar with psychedelic trance music? Is there anybody who has no idea what psychedelic trance music is at all? What type of music are you into?
Generally, all kind of music like hip hop, R&B, and stuff, but I'm not really checked out psychedelic trance.
Well, the genre is a very vast genre. There's many different producers and providing their own particular flavor on the music, and there are some relative rules that make the genre, and we'll be going over some of the particular aesthetics that make psychedelic trance as we go along. But it's got a very wide tempo range. It can be as slow as the 130s, like 130 to 1, or actually now with today's age, the BPMs go well over 200. It can have a very vast range of tempo, and the things that make it what it is the psychedelia, the energy behind it, the pulse, the drive, and you can accomplish that no matter what tempo you work at, just by adhering, not really adhering, but keeping in mind certain fundamental concepts that we'll go into. The best thing for me to do right now is to play you one of my songs so you can get an idea of one of the substyles of psychedelic trance. I'm not an expert on all the styles. I'm not even an expert on the style that I make, but this is just how I express myself through this medium. So I'll play a particular song. This one was written in Ableton Live. It's called Algorithm because it's an algorithmic composition. I created, I think, a total of 32 different synth patches and had Ableton using its follow actions capabilities trigger these groups of eight, and it would trigger one of these eight sounds anytime it received a note to play something. And I just wanted to see if I could like build something that kind of drove itself to a certain degree. Of course, I still had to step in and intervene in a lot of ways, but the sound design and the synth work was pretty much just setting up like, 32 different synths and having these things randomly change. But it's not necessarily random. It's just doesn't happen in a way that we can correspond. We can't follow how it actually works or what's going to happen next. So it seems random, but it creates this nice conversation between eight different pieces, eight different instruments. So this is called Algorithm, and here we go. Okay, you guys kind of get the picture. At this point, I'm usually mixing out of the track by this point, and my endings probably could be better, to be perfectly bluntly honest. So, but this comes from a DJ background. Usually, as a DJ, I like to mix for at least like a minute and a half to 2 minutes. So that last minute and a half of the song might just feel like it's just losing parts. Personal aesthetic, I guess. You know, some people don't do things that way. And sometimes I don't, but more often than not, it's just the old training, old habits die hard. So that's a little bit about the type of music that I make. We should next let's talk about some of the fundamental concepts that make psychedelic trance. One of the things that separates it from most of the other genres is that pulsing bass, that like that driving, just machine gun like pulse of sub frequencies and just nasty sawtooth. Now, the best thing for us to do is let's just kind of start something. I think to start, we'll start first in logic. So what I have here is I have a little thing that I've kind of already started, but what we're going to do is we're just going to start semi-fresh. We're going to leave these channels here, but we'll make new channels. Now, the first thing that we always have to consider whenever we're starting a project is tempo. What tempo are we going to work at? Some people, the tempo is wide. It's you can do whatever you want. I've particularly chosen 150 just for the ease that it has for understanding time. Because when you're thinking about musical time, you're thinking quarter note, eighth note, 16th note. But how long is that really? It's kind of nebulous. But the best one of the things that I use, and I go to the internet for this, where bandcoach.org has a time calculator. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look for the BPM to milliseconds calculator to convert your tempo to exactly how long one of your intervals is really going to be. 150 at one quarter note, process, and per beat 400 milliseconds. And this is where I want the semi-quaver 16th note, 100 milliseconds. This is why I choose 150 because it's really easy to remember 100 milliseconds. This comes into play specifically when you're wanting to shape sounds based on time. And when we get into sculpting the bass line, it's going to come in very, very handy. But we just keep this in the back of our mind. So now that we thought about tempo, we know how long a 16th note is, and we can always refer back to this. The next thing we got to figure out is what key we're going to work in. Now, yeah, I tend to like lower notes personally. I most of my songs range from C all the way up maybe to G. I do have an occasional G or two, but C through E is usually my preferred. That's what really moves my stomach and my lower chakras. So in this particular case, what we'll do is I will choose D. Why not? So this tells us exactly what frequency that we're going to be working with. It's going to explain to us, so okay, so if we're using D1, that means it's going to be 36.71 hertz. This comes in handy when we want to do equalization. So we know basically where we stop at, where like right around where we can start making our adjustments. So let's now I've loaded up a blank instrument, and we're going to use the Ultra Beat. I I think that honestly, you can make really decent stuff 99% of the time with the stock instruments if you know how to use them properly. There's sometimes you want a different sound characteristic and you might want to use third party. I definitely use my fair share of third party software, but you also owe it to yourself to give it a shot to try using the stock instrument. So here we have an Ultra Beat. I have a default setting set up to where it's just blank. We're going to make a kick drum. Now, what is a kick drum? A kick drum is usually characterized by having this kind of attack, this snap, but also this lower characteristics, this low thud, this low body. So that starts to make us allow us to get in the mind frame of okay, what are we looking for here? We want to start with something like low sounding, maybe. So we'll take this particular oscillator, changing it to a phase oscillator, and we're going to change the root pitch of it. Actually, I'll click on this one. We'll change the root pitch of it all the way down to I'll use okay. What we're running in D. Let's use D. D1. This is a 73. Quite okay. If you guys were looking previously where it's 36.71, counts this particular chart counts middle C as C4. Logic and most other software counts middle C as C3. Not a big deal. Not a big deal. You just jump that octave up if you want to, 73.4. Just to keep things in mind. So what we'll do now is we'll just use Ultrabeat to throw in a pattern real quick. Nothing too crazy, something pretty simple. And what I like to do is I like to adjust the volume down ahead of time because I don't want to blow nobody's eardrums out, and it's better to not blow your own eardrums out as well. Once we get into getting this kick in order, then we'll talk about how to set your levels to a reasonable level. So, well, now this is just the sine wave. Just the sine wave. We haven't done anything to it. I'm just turning it down just a hair. So at this point, we can kind of get a glimpse of where that low end push from the kick drum comes from. But how to get that attack that we want? There's some techniques that would have you layer on the attack from something else, like take it from a kick that you already have, use like some noise, something like that, which is all viable. However, the method that I will teach you is basically the infected mushroom technique, where it uses an envelope, an ASDR envelope, to modulate the pitch of that oscillator in such a way where it creates a nice little snap up top and still provides enough room for the bottom. Now, here's how we will go about this. We're going to go to the modulation for this particular oscillator. We're going to set this to envelope 2. Now, once that's been set, there's a little thing here that's going to say the range of the modulation. I'm going to take this bad boy all the way up to, we're in D6. I know, it hurts, I know. So the next stage that we go to is we're going to shape this. So we just drag the decay. And then once you get around 100 milliseconds, it starts sounding more and more like something that you might be interested in. Now, to get rid of that lovely little squeak, we have to shape this envelope. There's a couple of shaping elements here. And this little bad boy right here, this is what does it. Now, I'm going to give it a little bit of sustain, or the sense of sustain. And you can season to taste. This is like making a soup, you know. All right. So now it seems like we've got us a halfway decent sounding kick drum in no less than like 20 seconds. Not bad, right? Here's what makes it really, what really does the work is this envelope. See, if it was just a linear envelope where it just looked like kind of like a triangle, you'd have this type of effect. But allowing it to scoop in, having this logarithmic type of curve, really gets that punch. It shapes it oh so nicely. So I'm going to drag out the decay just a little bit more. Just ooh, I kind of like that. All right. Now we're going to call this kick. And let's see how it will drag out the sequence from Ultrabeat here and get rid of the sequencer. One incredibly handy thing about Logic, if you guys don't know about it, is this. If you hit E on your keyboard, it brings you to the event list. The event list is really, really, really nice because it allows you to basically edit like the MIDI or any particular events that are happening. So in this case, there's a funky little, all right. There was something not nice that came with that Ultrabeat, so we're just going to make a new thing. And personally, as an aesthetic, as a preference actually, to make things easier for yourself, I like to set the initial velocity on my kick drum as loud as possible. So that way, you know, when you set it, eventually when you set the volume, it's not going to go any much louder than that. So you can have velocity tricks or velocity fills that are less. So it calls more attention to when the kick comes back at times. So we have this nifty kick drum thing. Let's check out the envelope. Shorten it up a little bit. All right, so we've got kick 2. Let's see how it stacks up to this one that I made at home. Not necessarily too bad, but it's a little bone crush. This one's a little more bone crushing. Here's why. Our volume level is set very, very high. One of the things that I want to talk about is leveling. It is better to work with your sounds at a reasonable volume where you can have something called headroom, which is the space above where your mix is to the top. It's like, we have a lot of room between our heads and the ceiling right now, which is great. Otherwise, if all our heads were like all the way up near the ceiling, somebody went to stand up, you'd bump your head. Same principle would apply to sound. So, one of the ways that I like to go about things is priorities. In dance music, the rhythm, the bass, those are usually, as long as you're not dealing with vocals, like any singing in particular, as long as you're not dealing with vocals, you can usually get away with having your kick drum, bass line paramount. Like that's going to get the loudest treatment. It'll have the loudest volume, and everybody else is slightly less, depending on whose role, whose importance, who needs it. So when I first started writing music, I was a very bad boy, and I would like crank it to zero. It's like kick drum at zero, yeah. I had to learn the hard way about dynamics and just over processing, abusing dynamics processors. We'll get to that. The quickest way to eliminate any issues is to work at a comfortable volume. If you don't think that things are loud enough when you initially set it in the computer, turn up your stereo system, turn up your monitoring, or better yet, get yourself at a comfortable level where you know you're comfortable working with, and then just have everything adjust from there. You don't need to blare it to get more power. You can leave that to the mastering engineer. Your objective is to get a clear, concise mix that tells the story of the song perfectly the way that you intend it to. And sometimes people can overprocess, and myself included, I've had the mistake of overprocessing sounds to make them loud and bright and like big, and it compromised the dynamics of the song as well. So start low. Start low. In this particular case, I've been running my kick about negative 10 decibels. So I think that's what we're going to do. Let me just turn this up. All right, there we go. Now let's see how that compares to the other one. Either way, pretty decent. So this is basically the kick. The kick is really just the manipulation of the pitch. You get the pitch to jump up real high to make this nice little tap, but only for a small amount of time. Usually, I would with Ultrabeat, it doesn't really provide you like numerical envelope settings. You kind of have to do it by ear. But if you notice that when I dragged out when I wanted the pitch envelope to end, it's set at about 82 milliseconds. Now we know that a 16th note is 100 milliseconds, so that leaves roughly 18 milliseconds of pure sine, that low push that you want, that extra low push that you want. So it gives you a little bit of time for that. Sometimes I use Ultrabeat for kicks. Sometimes I use a third-party synth that we'll go into when we go to the Ableton side of things. But either way, if you use samples, if you collect samples, feel free. It's always helpful to know the root pitch. If If you've got good ear training, you can match it by ear perfect. If you need some tools to help you, use some tools, whatever you got to do. But make sure like you're trying to use things that are at least relatively closely tuned to where your bass is going to be. So you don't want some weird, like, odd harmonic clash happening between your kick and bass where things are actually supposed to work as a gel. So now that we've talked about the kick drum, we should. I've taken the liberty of making a few different bass synths, and we'll go into how these are constructed because I wasn't actually sure about the monitoring situation. So I can try to reconstruct these for you, but I might not be able to hear so well because I'm over here. But we'll try it. But first we have a sampled ESM. ESM is a stock synth from Logic. It's one of my first bass synths. The problem with the ESM is that it's fiddly as all get out. For instance, what I will do is I'll just drag this ESM bass patch. Already, you can hear some inconsistencies with the timing. Now, once we introduce some cutoff and then some decay, it's flying around all over the place. For me, that's a problem. I need things to be consistent when it comes to my bass. But the tone is nice. I like the tone. So, what I do at this point is I just bring it all the way up. Don't let the cutoff deal with it whatsoever. And I will, from that point, make a very long note. Well, not a very long note, but a one beat note at the tonic that I want it to be at, which we'll choose D today. And yeah, we'll just make it one. Actually, I'll make it one bar because that might come in handy. Okay, I'll just adjust this. Now, when that's played, isn't that a rich, like, doesn't that feel like it's got some power to it? All right. So now I'm just going to take the raw audio. I'm going to bounce region. We'll call it D1 ESM. It'll mute the source. There's no effects on it. We're fine. Okay. Now we have the audio for this right here. It's all good. Now, the best thing next, you can go in and cut up, like you can go in and cut out exactly a 16th note if you want to. I have Logic set up to edit at 0 crossings, so see how it goes. I'll bring this up just a little bit. This hash marker right here represents the end of a 16th note. However, you notice like at the 0 crossing, it happens after the fact. This is what causes bass notes to run into each other, to kind of mush together because they're not like when they fully develop. By the time they finish fully developing, the next bass line is already developing too, and they can step on each other. There's a couple of different ways you can go about fixing this. One way is just to get from the previous 0 crossing, but it might be a hair too late, or too short for people. It's a possibility to do it like this. However, there also is another way, and it's the lazy and easy way. We're going to just convert it to a sampler instrument. I used the command Control E to bring up convert regions to new sampler track. We'll convert the region, have it start at D1, which is the tonic, all the way to D8. Spits out this nice long note. Now we have to tell it what to do. Now let's just let's give it. We'll copy this MIDI down. Make this a D as well. And actually, I wanted the piano roll, but let's just scroll this down. All right. So we have raw kick and bass action right now. Let's just make sure nothing else is playing but what I want, and we'll just use this kick. Now this is just straight. This is just because it's being run through the sampler and it's being re-triggered. A couple of things I want to do to the sampler. I just want to reduce the voices to 1, make sure it's mono, and we're going to engage the filter. Turn it on. This drive thing is really what makes the ESX24 really awesome. It just does wonderful things. So now what I'm doing is I'm going to take the cutoff to a point where it's more felt than heard, so to speak. Now, like the kick drum, the envelope will work wonders on helping this sound come to fruition. Because psychedelic trance bass lines are characteristic for having a pluck to them, but they also have this extra force, similar to the kick drum. But in this case, we will not be using any pitch modulation. We will just be modulating our low-pass filter cutoff. Now, to do that, we will pick our destination here, which is filter cutoff, and we'll just use the source envelope 1. And I'm just going to choose a value to start with, and decay is where you want to go. Now, remember, 100 milliseconds. So we start roughly around there, and we can adjust as we see fit. Now that already has a little bit of bite to it. I'm going to adjust the sustain a little bit so it has a little more. Now I'm taking this up all the way in particular. You hear that click? We don't want that. Bring it down just before it clicks. You want it to be articulate, but not too clicky. I mean, there's some people that prefer clicky basses, but for my personal aesthetic, I like it to be just there, but not to where you can hear like the higher registers too much of the attack of the bass. So that was actually kind of easy, huh? All we did was just sample a note, and the ESM patch was really just raw. I just threw it in, put it on a sawtooth wave, and rendered it out. What's doing right now, it's the note lengths have not been altered, but it seems to re-trigger nicely. I'm going to adjust the drive now. And it kind of gives a little bit more bite, because what the drive is basically an overdrive that happens. I think this happens after the cutoff stage in this particular device. So it's distorting basically what comes out afterwards slightly. And so it gives it a little more bite, a little more teeth in a sense. So I'm now adjusting the volume of this to be somewhere below where the kick is. I have the kick at -10, so anywhere like close to 10, but not 10, maybe 12 works. It depends on the bass, as we'll see from other examples. So that was from a sampled ESM, and yeah, this is another version of the sampled ESM. Very, like, it's got some nice. This is something I would use in a track for sure. Let's see. There's also another favorite of many producers, which is Logic's ES1. This particular one I wrote in the key of E because for me the lower registers doesn't jive as well. But let's open it up and take a look at what's going on. Once again, this is another relatively simple patch, just a sawtooth single oscillator going through a 24 decibel per octave low pass filter. No resonance. Just a bit of drive. And this is the way, with the filter all the way up, this is the way it sounds. Not really so killer. It's really getting that cutoff exactly where you want it. That really helps get it to pulsate a little bit better. There's a couple of tricks that I did with this too, where I have an envelope controlling. I have two envelopes controlling the cutoff because this thing's a little tricky. If you're ever using the ES1 for bass, two things to be aware of. If you have the attack all the way down, you're going to get that click. If you don't want that, you're going to have to just adjust till it's just barely gone. Just barely gone. But it still maintains the character. It still maintains some sense of attack to it. ES1 would be something that is anybody can pick up and use. This we can actually we can just go from a basic patch. I just have an initial patch that I rigged up. So now we're just going in and adjusting things from scratch. You hear that? When your release is too low, it's gonna basically cut off before that zero crossing point happens, as when we looked at the waveform zoomed in. So if we give it a little bit of attack, seems to clear that right up. All right, now this is the filter envelope. And right now we've just got it full sustain, full decay. But to sculpt it, let's take it down. And now that we've gotten the decay down, we can further adjust the attack. Adjust the overdrive a little bit. And now give some sustain. Okay. Maybe a little bit more. And we are more or less or almost back to where we were. The next little trick that I pulled was to adjust the cutoff with this modulation envelope, which we will get into the nitty-gritty about envelopes and low-frequency oscillators in just a short bit. but I'm now adjusting the cutoff. So it's got now a little bit more high-end presence, which allows me to pull down the initial cutoff. All right. So that's almost where we had it at. Not too bad. ES1. Stock Logic synth, not bad for bass, not bad for other sounds too, but it can surprise you.
Very much like to thank Pyramide for hosting me here once again. I think this institution is really cool, and until I came here for the first time, I had never seen anything like it in my whole life.
What I think really separates us from other people who teach is that we are outrageously passionate about what we do, and especially in electronic music.
Since coming to Pyramide, I've discovered electronic music, and San Francisco being a mecca for underground electronic music opened up so many doors for me, and kind of blew my mind.
We cover everything from absinthe to contact. When people get to the mind-melting level, we get into modular synthesis.
Everything about native instruments, everything about Logic synths, down to the finest detail. We learned it all.
The fundamentals of understanding how things work, that's just essential. But then beyond that, there's so much more, and that's where it gets into just a lot of the artistic side of like the creative approach of why you do something, not just how.
There's a lot of schools that just, they focus on the technicality of recording music, but I wanted something that would foster creativity and really help me develop as an artist as well.
Each of our genre-specific programs comes in 4 levels. There's a basic, an advanced, a professional, and then a master's level. And the master's level is, of course, everything we do. It's the largest and most powerful programs that we can create for you.